The FBI called him the most dangerous man alive. Governments across the world put a $5 million reward on his head. Agencies in Europe, North America, and the Middle East spent decades building cases against him. And tonight, as you watch this, he is probably sitting in a luxury Moscow restaurant, eating dinner with his family, completely free. His name is Semion Mogilevich, and the story of how one man built a criminal empire that stretched from the back alleys of Soviet Ukraine to the boardrooms of Wall Street, without ever being convicted of a single major crime, is one of the most extraordinary stories of the 20th century. Before this video is over, you will learn how he trafficked nuclear materials, how he crashed a billion-dollar stock market, how he controlled arms factories, banks, and airlines across a dozen countries, and how every single government that tried to stop him failed. This is the story of the man no government could catch. To understand Semion Mogilevich, you first have to understand the world that created him. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. What followed was not freedom. It was chaos. Across Eastern Europe, factories shut down overnight. Banks became worthless. Governments that had run on iron control for decades suddenly had no control at all. Unemployment exploded. Law enforcement, underpaid and leaderless, either looked the other way or joined the corruption themselves. This vacuum did not stay empty for long. Organized crime filled it. Eurasian criminal groups that had existed in the shadows of the Soviet system stepped into the open. They moved fast, they moved globally, and they were ruthless. In November 1994, a multinational working group of Russian, German, Italian, and American law enforcement gathered in Moscow to discuss the scale of what they were now facing. They identified 5 Eurasian criminal organizations with multinational operations serious enough to require joint investigation. One of those 5 organizations was the Mogilevich organization. Semion Yudkovich Mogilevich was born on June 30th, 1946, in Kiev, in what was then the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. He grew up in a Jewish family in the Podil neighborhood of the city. He was not, by any measure, the profile of a typical criminal. In 1968, he graduated with a degree in economics from the University of Lviv. He was an educated man, a thinking man, and that, more than anything else, is what made him so dangerous. Mogilevich's criminal career began quietly in the early 1970s, when he became affiliated with the Lyubertsy crime group operating out of Moscow. His early work was unremarkable: petty theft, counterfeiting, the kinds of small crimes that filled the Soviet underworld. But even then, he was not thinking like a street criminal. He was thinking like an economist. His first significant scheme came from an unlikely opportunity. In the late 1970s and into the 1980s, tens of thousands of Ukrainian and Russian Jews were emigrating to Israel, to America, to anywhere they could reach. Leaving the Soviet Union on short notice, they had one major problem. They could not quickly sell their property or transfer their assets. Mogilevich offered a solution. He made contracts with desperate families, promising to sell their homes and possessions at fair market value and forward the money to them abroad. Instead, he sold everything and kept every ruble. The families arrived in their new countries with nothing. Mogilevich arrived in the 1980s as a man with capital. The Soviet state eventually caught up with parts of his scheme. In 1974, he was charged with illegal currency trading. In 1977, he was charged with fraud. He served prison time for both. But Mogilevich did not leave prison broken. He left educated in a different sense, educated in what large-scale financial crime could accomplish if done with enough sophistication to stay ahead of the law. By the 1980s, he had elevated himself into a new league entirely. He began working with the Solntsevskaya Bratva, one of Russia's most powerful organized crime syndicates. His role was not enforcer. His role was financial brain. He became the primary architect of the Bratva's money laundering operations, moving dirty money through layers of companies and accounts until it came out clean on the other side. By 1990, Semion Mogilevich was already a millionaire. He left for Israel with a group of key lieutenants. He was done with small crimes. He was done thinking small. Hungary was about to become the headquarters of a criminal empire. Mogilevich arrived in Budapest in 1991, after a brief period in Israel. He had chosen Hungary deliberately. The country was newly post-communist, its institutions were weak, its law enforcement was underfunded, and its borders were porous. It was, for a man of his abilities, perfect. He married a Hungarian woman named Katalin Pap, which gave him Hungarian citizenship, and then he went to work. His first major acquisition was the Black and White nightclub in Budapest. On the surface, it was an entertainment venue. In reality, it became the operational headquarters of his entire organization. He purchased additional establishments in Prague, including the U Holubu restaurant, which Czech police would later identify as the central hub of his Czech Republic operations. These were not businesses. They were command centers, disguised as nightlife. The financial architecture of the empire was built around a company called Aragon Limited, registered in 1990 in Alderney in the Channel Islands of the United Kingdom. Aragon dealt extensively with the Ukrainian State Railway Administration, sold oil products, held exclusive rights to insure tourists traveling to Ukraine, and maintained accounts in Stockholm, New York, London, and Geneva. According to investigators, Aragon laundered more than $30 million from Europe into the United States. In May 1995, British police raided Aragon's offices and arrested several key figures. It shook the organization, but it did not stop it. In 1993, Mogilevich moved into the arms industry. Through Aragon Limited, he acquired a 95% interest in Army Co-op, a Hungarian arms factory that produced anti-aircraft guns. He then used Army Co-op to privatize the state-run Dijep General Machine Works, which manufactured artillery shells, mortars, and fire equipment. With a single transaction, Semion Mogilevich became the direct owner of a significant portion of Hungary's armaments industry. He purchased a weapons dealing license to go with it. His organization's Czech Republic operations, meanwhile, were documented by Ukrainian intelligence as being involved in the trafficking of illegal weapons, radioactive materials, and precious gems. The financial empire kept expanding. In 1994, Mogilevich took control of Inkombank, one of the largest private banks in Russia. He conducted secret arrangements with the bank's chairman that gave him direct access to the global financial system. The bank collapsed under money laundering suspicions in 1998. In 1996, he acquired a significant share in Sukhoi, one of Russia's largest military aircraft manufacturers. He also purchased a bankrupt airline from a former Soviet Central Asian republic, not to run a legitimate airline business, but to traffic heroin out of Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle. By 1998, the Mogilevich organization was estimated to own more than 90 offices, warehouses, and businesses across the globe, with its primary concentration in Hungary, the Czech Republic, and the United States. The organization ran an extensive prostitution operation out of its nightclubs in Budapest and Prague. It produced 15 million bottles of fake Absolute vodka per month, packaged with forged documentation, and sold to Hungarian companies for $2 million a truckload. Phone records from a February 1994 visit to Warsaw show Mogilevich placing calls to a Vienna number tied to known associates of both the Cali and Medellin Colombian cartels. He was not a local crime boss. He was the chief executive of a global criminal conglomerate. Of everything Semion Mogilevich did, The scheme that finally brought him to the full attention of Western law enforcement was not a weapons deal or a drug shipment. It was a stock market fraud, and it was breathtaking in its audacity. In 1992, Mogilevich established a company called YBM Magnex in Budapest. By 1997 and 1998, YBM Magnex International Incorporated was listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. To investors, it appeared to be a legitimate magnet manufacturing company based just outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Its offices existed. Its equipment existed. Its paperwork looked real. For years, it fooled auditors, banks, and financial regulators across multiple countries. What it actually was a front, a vehicle for laundering the proceeds of arms deals and narcotics trafficking through a web of fake invoices and hidden offshore accounts. At its peak, shares in YBM Magnex were worth approximately $1 billion on the open market. When the FBI and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission finally raided the company's headquarters in 1998, the stock collapsed to near zero within hours. Thousands of ordinary investors lost their money. Mogilevich was, as he always was when investigators closed in, nowhere to be found. The same year, in a separate incident that had occurred 3 years earlier in Prague, the pattern repeated itself. In May 1995, Czech police received an anonymous tip that a summit meeting of Eurasian organized crime leaders was taking place at the U Holubu restaurant. The occasion was the birthday of Sergei Mikhailov, head of the Solntsevskaya Bratva, and the bosses were gathering to carve out criminal jurisdictions and resolve a dispute involving Mogilevich. Czech police raided the restaurant. They detained over 200 people and photographed, fingerprinted, and copied the diaries and journals of those present. Mogilevich and his lieutenants were absent. He had either been warned or had warned the police himself as a tactical move against his rivals. What followed showed a different dimension of Mogilevich's power. Rather than go quiet, he went on the offensive. He activated a network of former communist-era intelligence informants still embedded in Czech institutions and launched a disinformation campaign through the Czech media. He targeted the parliamentary speaker and the deputy minister of the Interior directly. The campaign was designed to discredit the investigation and destabilize the officials pursuing him. The Czech Republic imposed a 10-year travel ban on him. Hungary declared him persona non grata. The British government barred him from the United Kingdom, declaring him one of the most dangerous men in the world. 3 countries banned him, and he never spent a day in their prisons. By the early 2000s, the American legal apparatus was finally moving against Mogilevich with serious intent. On March 13, 2002, he was indicted in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. In February 2003, a superseding indictment was filed charging him and 3 co-conspirators with RICO conspiracy, money laundering, wire fraud, securities fraud, mail fraud, and a range of related offenses. Notices of forfeiture against Mogilevich exceeded $50 million. In 2003, the FBI publicly named him the most powerful Russian gangster in the world. In 2009, he was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, a list he shared, at various points, with the most dangerous individuals on Earth. And yet nothing happened. Russia had no extradition treaty with the United States. The Russian government showed no interest in cooperating. Western officials accused the Kremlin of actively shielding him. Rumors of direct connections between Mogilevich and senior figures in the Russian government, including Vladimir Putin, circulated among intelligence agencies for years. He had not ceased to travel to the West in the late 1990s for any reason related to fear. He had ceased because Russia had become, for him, an untouchable sanctuary. In January 2008, there was a moment when it appeared the system had finally caught him. Russian commandos arrested Mogilevich in a Moscow shopping mall on charges of tax evasion, linked to a Russian perfume store chain called Arbat Prostyis. Those close to him believed the arrest had nothing to do with perfume and everything to do with the ongoing Russia-Ukraine gas disputes, in which Mogilevich was believed to be a major behind-the-scenes actor. He was held for a period, then released on bail. The charges were quietly dropped. In 2015, Mogilevich was removed from the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. He has never been convicted of a major crime. The U.S. State Department's Transnational Organized Crime Rewards Program continues to offer up to $5 million for information leading to his arrest or conviction. As of today, that reward remains unclaimed. According to the FBI, Mogilevich lives freely in Moscow. He does not travel outside Russia. He does not need to. What made him truly different from every other organized crime figure of his era was not his brutality. It was his restraint. He was known for advising his subordinates to use their brains to find a solution before resorting to violence. Violent work was carried out by enforcers, young men, some trained by veterans of the Soviet-Afghan War, who handled the physical side of operations while Mogilevich remained insulated from any direct connection to the violence. The separation was intentional. It was architectural. It was the work of a man who thought like a CEO and operated like a ghost. Semion Mogilevich began his criminal career as a small-time fraudster in Soviet Moscow, scamming desperate Jewish families out of their life savings. Within 20 years, he controlled arms factories, a major Russian bank, a military aircraft manufacturer, a stock market-listed company, and criminal operations across 4 continents. He did it not through brute force, but through intellect, through architecture, through building systems that were always one step ahead of the people chasing him. Every government that looked for him found the same thing: a trail of shell companies, front businesses, and offshore accounts that led nowhere actionable. Every country that tried to prosecute him ran into the same wall: Russia. And Russia had no reason to hand him over, and every reason, according to those who watched closely, to keep him exactly where he was. What the story of Semion Mogilevich reveals is not just the story of one extraordinary criminal. It is the story of a system. A system in which organized crime and government power can become so intertwined that no law enforcement agency, no matter how determined, can pull them apart. The FBI knew his name. Multiple governments knew his address. $5 million sat on the table for anyone willing to talk. And still, nothing. Every government knows where he is. Every agency knows his name. And yet, the most wanted criminal of his generation remains alive, remains free, and by all accounts remains winning. Some men are simply too powerful to be touched. If you want to understand how the world's other untouchable crime bosses built their empires and how they stayed free, watch the next video. And if this story told you something you did not know before today, subscribe. There is a lot more where this came from.